Apple trees or peach trees, which are the best to grow and why? Do you have a space in your backyard and you want to grow a fruit tree but you're not sure which? Stick around to the end and I'll give you my recommendations. When it comes to choosing your fruit trees that you want to grow in your backyard, there are some key considerations to think about. 1. What size are they going to grow to? How much space have you got to actually fill with the tree? Do you want it to be a tree shape or do you want it to grow like an espalier along a fence line somewhere? Do you want your tree to be dwarf, semi-dwarf, normal-sized, mid-sized, large? Do you want to grow a full-size one but keep it pruned so you're getting lots of fruit but not the size? What's your climate like? Is it really frosty? Is it cold during the summer? Do you have long dry summers and cool, cold frosty nights? What do you actually prefer to eat? Do you prefer apples or do you prefer peaches? Now apples. Apples are a really hardy plant. They usually don't mind the soil being a little clayey. They don't mind it being a little bit wet. And they don't mind if your summers don't get that hot either. Most apple varieties come in dwarf, semi-dwarf, or a whole range of different sizes, so you can pick your favourite variety and then choose the rootstock or size that you prefer. Before we get too far, fruit trees are usually made up of two parts. The bottom half is the rootstock. The rootstock usually defines how large a tree grows and also how hardy it is to certain soil conditions and some diseases as well. And then the top half of your fruit tree is made up of the scion wood or the graft, or sometimes it's a bud, but either way that is the variety that you're going to be getting the fruit from, and that is the one that you choose when you're wanting to choose a particular type of fruit. What's your favourite apple variety? Let me know in the comments below. So there are two different parts to consider when you're choosing your types of trees. What size you want them to be, what conditions you want them to grow in, but also what variety you want them to be when they fruit. So the upside to apples is they are relatively tolerant of a lot of conditions. They come in multiple different sizes, a huge range of varieties of types. You can get them for eating, you can get them for cooking, you can get them for preserving, and you can get ones that eat well later. They store really well. The downside to apples is one, they're not peaches, so if you love peaches, then an apple's just not going to hit the spot. The other thing is they do tend to be very large trees. You can keep them pruned, but to get the most fruit from them, you're going to want to let them get relatively large. You can, however, espalier them along a fence. They do take a lot of pruning. There's a bit of an art to it, but it's definitely doable. And they also need what's called a pollinator. So most apple trees are not self-fertile. You'll need a different apple tree or a crab apple that the pollinators can share pollen between so they actually get some fruit. Now all is not lost if you only have room for one tree, because you can get double or triple and sometimes even quadruple grafted trees with varieties that are compatible, so it's worth talking to your local nursery and see what they have on offer. The other thing about apple trees is they do not grow true to seed, which means you have to graft them to get the same variety that you're after. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, and you can buy those varieties usually from a nursery, and it's not that hard to graft them yourself if you want to give it a go. Now peach trees. Peaches are smaller, so they do tend to be better suited for backyards. They're also self-fertile, so you only need one of them. To get a bumper crop, you are better having at least one other stone fruit around that they can share pollen. Like apples, peaches can come in a range of sizes. You can get dwarf, semi-dwarf, and all the other different sizes as well. But even a full-size peach tree will happily be kept small if it's pruned well. Peaches tolerate frost. In fact, some peaches need frost to be able to set their fruit. But what peaches really need is long, hot days over the summer so that they can ripen, which apples are not so fussy about. Here we barely get peaches to ripen, but the apples will ripen really happily. The downside to peaches is if you are getting temperatures well down in the negative Celsiuses, so negative 20, negative 30 Celsius, which is what, negative 20-ish Fahrenheit I think, peaches may struggle, whereas an apple or a pear, you're probably more likely to be able to get them to survive. Peaches are also a bit less tolerant of wet feet. If they are in boggy wet soil, they will die really easily and quickly. And they also don't tolerate really high winds very well. Peaches can also grow true to type, so if you get a peach that you really like the taste of, you can usually grow that pit and get a tree that will make that same fruit. So, what tree should you grow in your place? Honestly, it depends on your context. If your soil's a bit wetter, your summers aren't so hot, you get some frosts, then maybe apples are the best option for you. If you get a few frosts, long hot summer days, and your ground drains really well, then peaches are definitely your option. When it comes to choosing your size, go to your local nursery and ask them what they have available, and then try and work out what's going to fit where you are. And understand that a dwarf tree will never produce as much fruit as a full-size tree will, even if you're keeping that full-size tree trimmed right down to the size a dwarf tree would be anyway. The dwarf trees just don't have the same root capacity as a large tree does, and as such they just don't make as much fruit. Now, you're not just limited to apples or peaches. There are a variety of other options as well: plums, cherries, apricots, even figs, pears, quince. If you've enjoyed this video, I recommend that you check out these other two videos, one on grafting trees and one on growing peaches from stones.